This is going to be the last talk on the Astro stage for today. And on our closing, we have Dejan here, who is a software engineer at Endava, and he's been there long enough so he can share our best practices on how to use React Router and how to basically get the most out of it. So I'm going to hand it over to you. You do your thing.
Thank you.
Let's have
Can you guys hear me? I think yes, I can hear myself talking. Yes. Okay, great. So today we'll speak about solving a specific problem, specific issue that is, let's say that we can use this solution into multiple different applications, and it is definitely related to React Router, but also it's not, how can I say, it's not, it can be used also with Vue.js router, for example, or something different. So let's start with agenda. We have request description. Everything starts from request description. And in our world, most of you guys probably are using Jira. So if you're using Jira or solving any specific task, you need to first understand it. That's the first part. And here we will go through some examples of the request that I needed to solve. And also we'll go through something that should be a guidance for all of us when we are doing code, patterns, good practices, etc. Let's say that the end result was a solution design and some rules of thumb that were simply like a product of this solution, and we'll go through some diagram and also some live coding. I like to write a simple code, but I like to make my life complex, so I do live coding. Okay, so this is let's say that this is a very short description of our the thing that we want to solve. Upon navigating to next page, we are of course talking about SPA applications. We're going from one page to the next. We want to leave trace of data. The thing is that that maybe sounds like a simple problem, and of course, the solution is simple, but the problem itself can be very complex. If we are using the wrong things, the things that comes to our mind first, and we don't think about it. So let's go through some examples to understand the problem better. If, for example, we have filling of multiple forms, and we have the submit button in the end, like 10th page or whatever, then we have to somehow maintain state between every other page. On the previous page, we entered some text or some image or something similar. On the next page, we also entered some data. We left some trace of data. And when we go back, we want to see that data on that page. The next example would, of course, have something to do with the guitars. I'm a big fan of those. But of course, it can be applied to other entities. The thing is, if we have a couple of pages, we are navigating through pages, and we want to make certain filters to filter out all white guitars. Then we want to filter out guitars with 7-string. Then we want to go back to change the filter. We want to keep state between different routes, and we want to have this data shown to the user once the user goes back, because user can simply change his mind, her mind, it doesn't matter. And when this happens, we need to apply different filter, but we need to see the previous filter that was applied. And of course, we can think of something similar, it doesn't matter, something different. So patterns, anti-pattern, pattern, good practices. There are certain things that we need to understand the patterns when we are using them, but we need to understand why we are using them. It's not the other way around. If we are trying to apply certain patterns, and we are not like, we try to apply certain pattern just for the pattern's sake, that's not good, I think. The thing is, we need to apply certain patterns because they have proven that they are good solutions for certain problems. In this solution, there is a single source of truth. That's always a good pattern. And we use browser stack, history stack. Next pattern is we use a state machine approach. We want to have like we want to have a state machine approach in which we don't want to think about the previous state or the next state. We would just want to think about the current state, the current route in this example. We also definitely don't want to use persistent modules like Redux to solve this problem, because the Redux is great, of course, and use of persistent modules is not an anti-pattern. But for this special occasion, it's not a good solution. It will produce a lot of very complex calculations, which are not good by itself. And also, any persistent module like Redux, like React Context, or something different but similar, it's actually that's under the hood. Those are global variables, which are definitely not good. And also redundancy. Redundancy is something that we definitely don't want to introduce into our code. Okay, so if we are talking about good practices, this is something that that's very well known, but we need to mention those. So browser stack needs to reflect routing and corresponding directions. There are two directions. It's a binary thing. So we have the forward routing. I always imagine it from like from right to left. And forward routing is something that we can use to map our application, our navigation path, our possible paths. So routing map can be calculated with forward navigations. Why is that? Because, for example, we have a page, we have certain buttons on that page, or I don't know, certain entities that we can click on or hit enter or something. And from certain links, it will simply lead us to pages that we, as a developer, foresee. We know which pages needs to be like a forward routing thing. As for backward navigations, those are actually arbitrary. It depends from which point you take a look. But backward navigation is just clicking the back button. We need to go backwards through history stack, through browser stack. And we actually don't want to foresee which page will be the previous page. We want to leave the trace of data in history stack regarding the route itself. So we start with rules of thumb. The first rule is always use back navigation when navigating back. We have three methods that are priority methods with routers. With React router, also with Vue.js router and some others. We have the push method, we have replace method, and we also have push replace, and we also have back. Actually, navigate to, then we can like use -1 or just .back, I think. It depends on the version of the router. So if we want to go back to navigation, we definitely want to use the back function. We want to go up through history stack or left, whatever the way is you're thinking. So if we do something different, then we are doing a hack. For example, if we click on the back button but use forward navigation, we add something to the stack, then it's not true. We are showing the user what the user wanted to see, but it's simply not the way the React router, the history stack, is meant to be used. When navigating forward, but without adding to the stack, we can use replace. For example, if we have route 1, we have route 2, we want to go to route 3. If we don't want to keep route 2 in stack, we use replace. We replace route 2 with route 3. Then if we go back, with the first rule, of course, we will be back to route 1, which was something that we wanted. In that case, we definitely use replace. Now, we will speak about the next rule. It's in orange in our company's, how can I say, company official color, one of those. The thing is, this is the thing that came up to me when I wanted to solve this problem. When navigating forward, but we want to leave that trace of data that I was talking about. Then we can use a replace first with the same URL, because we cannot mutate actually the route itself, the state of the route. But we want to leave a different state. Why am I saying different? There is a difference between new and different. It's always different, even though there was some state, we want to replace it, or there was no state and we want to add some state. That's actually different. And then we want to use push. So those are two consequent actions. They are sequential. but it's from a certain perspective, it's one action from a user. User just navigates to the next page using a certain button, which a certain entity doesn't matter. But we do want to leave the trace of data. That's one programmatic action. The other action is to simply go forward. And then we have these additional rules. The first one is also part of the main problem solution. The main solution of the problem. It's use the state to reflect data per page, on page. So if you use React Router, we have a certain route, certain URL, which is corresponding to a certain component. We have a React component which needs to react. React component that needs to react, no pun intended. Ignore this, please. So we need to a component needs to react in a way to read if a certain data was left on the page, on that specific route. If the data was there, component needs to show it. Component needs to have this as a default data on the page. The thing is that we really want for component not to care if this was a result of forward navigation or backward navigation or any navigation. It could be a link, it doesn't matter. So only the thing that component cares about if there is a data there to show or not, if the default data should be shown. Actually, that will become a default data. And this is something that very much reminds of state machine. It's something that's really like easy to comprehend, and that's the code that I think we need to write. We need to write a simple code, effective code that anyone can maintain. Then we have additional rule. This rule I put here, it is definitely a part of the solution of the problem. But regarding this rule, it's a rule that this is a specific case which can occur very often. That's why I put it there. But there are other specific cases that can be solved through these good practices and also these two sequential actions. So, to explain this part. We have incoming route and outgoing route. Incoming route is route from which we are on, let's say we are pointing to route 1. We are showing some component to the user. We go to the next route. The route that we are currently in is outgoing route. We'll leave it. However, we have the incoming route on which we will navigate, and that's let's say that's the event that is of interest to us. So, if we want to do something different from the use case that I described, but it's definitely part of the mechanism. If we want to transfer data from outgoing route to next route, if we are doing from right to left, if you're doing forward navigation, then it's easy. It's simply push with parameters. However, if you want to do the other way around, we need to use back function. That is what first rule says. And that is the only thing that keeps history stack clean. If we do that, the back function simply cannot receive parameters. And there is a reason for it. It's implemented for a reason. So what do we want to do? We want to do something like this. We want to store data temporarily, that's the keyword, into Redux or MobX or any persistent module, any global variable, if you like. Why? Because we need to store it temporarily somewhere. We want to do a back. Then component itself, again, has a second thing to think about. First thing is if we have some data stored in the route, which was left like breadcrumbs, Hansel and Gretel principle. That's something that I made up. So if there is data there on the route, we want to show it. However, if we don't have data on the route, or it's a matter of prioritization, it doesn't matter if we have data. If we have data in persistent modules, for example, in Redux, that's the most common example, then we want to use Redux and have a priority under that data, depending on the data that we stored in the route, or the other way around, it doesn't matter. So in that way, we'll, for example, go through, I don't know, a couple of routes. We want to go back as a user. We want to transfer some data that we leave from the outgoing route. That's the use case. We can use persistent module, put some data there. Go back using the back navigation. Once we did that, we our component, our React component will react. It will check if there is data there, and also need to clean this up. If we don't clean up the persistent module, the global variable, then we can have bugs because every component will look through that. If any component has like similar data or it's exact same component, if we have circular dependency, then that will be a problem. Since I mentioned circular dependency, circular navigation, sorry. Circular navigation, this is the most interesting use case for solving this problem because we, for example, have route X, route Y, route Z. If we can navigate from route X to route Y and then can do a forward navigation to, again, route X, that's a circular navigation. And that's the, let's say, one of the most common problems why we don't want to use state manager to keep the data. Because if we go back to the component X, we don't know which component X that is. And we need to introduce some kind of, I don't know, dates. We need to do some complex calculation. If I go back from Y to X, could I already been in the X, or this is the second time? What was the time? Let me do some delta thinking. It's very complex. So in order to avoid this stuff, we want to do something different. We want to only use state management when it's really needed, and this is the way to do it, at least for this solution design. Okay, so let's recapitulate. Let's go through this diagram to try to understand all the use cases that we are trying to solve here. So the first one is simple. It's just push and back. And there are two variants. It's just push, let's say from route 1 to route 2. Yeah, from this diagram, I tried to cover all the cases. Like this is one diagram for everything, but I'll explain. So we definitely want to do push from route 1 to route 2. And the first option is we don't want to transfer any data. And if we go back, by of course using the back function from the router, we go back to route 1. That's simplest case. If we want to transfer some data to another route, from route 1 to route 2, for any reason, we also use push, but with parameters, which is a subcase of the first thing. And if we go back, that's okay, we are going back to route 1. The second one is also, let's say, fairly simple. We want to replace the existing page, route 1, with route 2, and the diagram will only contain route 2. I didn't do animation because I cannot think of a reason, I just didn't do it. If we replace route 1 with route 2, we only have route 2, and if we go back then, it doesn't show on the diagram, sorry. Then we come back to route 0, for example, but we remove it from stack, the route 1. The third one is the interesting one for us. It's keeping the data on page. So we have a certain data on route 1. We want to store this data on route 1, and we definitely don't know what that data is. We cannot foresee the future. For example, once the user enters the route 1 with a certain push, for example, we don't know how the user will leave that page, how the user will leave that route. But we do know that once the user actually clicks something or puts some data which will lead him to another page. Then it's the time to do a replace, because we cannot mutate the route with the same route, but with different state, with the state that was entered. After it, we can do push. We should do push, and those are the two mentioned actions that will work. When we click back, we go back to route 1, which already have trace to data, component reacts, we show the data. Yes, we have another one. This is let's say, the complex one. Use outgoing data for previous page. We store data into persistent module. We hit back. We use that data to replace on page, and we need to delete data from persistent module. Otherwise, it's simply we don't respect the rules. Now, this is my favorite part. Actually, I will not do a lot of coding, but I will show the code. Okay. So I will show you first the application. But you need to prepare, it's very like CSS heavy. Can you see it? Yeah. Okay. So what we want to achieve, let's try to first go through the code, then to application, then come back to the code. We have a navigation page. It's one of the pages that I want to use. And we only have two links, as you saw there. We have the first one, the menu item, to simply navigate to do route path. The shopping list is another thing. It's called shopping list, but it doesn't contain anything like that or to do. But it's important to differentiate those two components. Once we, let's for now ignore this part of the code. Once we go to, for example, shopping list, we then have just a couple of menu items. We have the back item, which will, I'll show you in the code, which will simply go, return, it will go back. We can navigate to to-do route path, to simply navigate to to-do, but don't leave trace of data. We can add a random number. So on purpose, I simplified this. We want to understand what's going on behind the hood. We don't want to have anything complicated, unnecessary. So we do replace, and then we do navigate to. And we want to show the number if the number exists. That's the thing with components reacting to certain data. So this back, let me just show you, is simply history.goBack. I'm using the router 5, but React router 5 version, but we can also use 6, of course. It's slightly different. We have navigate to, which receives a route. This is a closure around the route, and we do a history push with that specific route. Then we use replace. Replace here, I called it replace, but actually it should have a slightly different name. It's okay for this context. We want to do a history replace with the same route name, same path name, sorry, and we want to add the state. Afterwards, we want to navigate to another component, to do route. So this is fairly a simple code. Here there are a couple of lines just extracting stuff from hooks, nothing special. On purpose, I'll skip this part and we'll try to come back to it later. The to-do component is practically a mirror, so it's very similar, but there is additional function here, which we'll talk about later. So let's try this out. The first component will definitely be navigation. I called it navigation. And we want to go to do. So to do. That's cool. We want to add a random number here and go to shopping list. So this number is, for example, 5.1. Cool. And then go to shopping list. I just put alert here, it was easier. We have a shopping list here. And we want to, for example, add number here, 6.3. Cool. Now we want to do something different. We want to do another navigation. Of course, you notice this is something that I called circular navigation. So going to shopping list. Oh, I forgot the number. It was something. Okay, let's go back. Oh, we didn't add the number. Yeah, sorry. From to do, we went to shopping list. Let's do that the same. So let's try to unwind this. Let's try to add one more step. For example, to shopping list, we add 3.0. We have a to do again. And let's do back. Back, we left 3.0. It shows on the shopping list. Back, we have nothing, which is expected on to do. Back, we have 6.3. But, for example, user changes his mind, her mind. Let's add a different random number, 3.4 on shopping list. Let's add another one here from to do. I'll promise this won't be long. Okay. Okay, let's now go back. So we are currently expecting to do with 3.9. That's fine. We go back. We expect shopping list with 3.4. That's fine. And remember the 5.1. It was a long way back. Oh, here it is. That's great. Last but not least, we do have this navigation. So this was a demo of how we can leave any trace of data. This was a very simplified example, but we can do it with anything. I mean, it should be fairly simple to add some simple text, but definitely we can do it anything. Okay, so let's now go back to the code. And we can go back to the part of the code that I said that I will mention later. So we have this use effect mounting component that we want to check if there is some data in this case Redux, because we are using the selector. If there is data, let's show this data. Cool. And let's do this. Let's dispatch it let's dispatch an action which will clean up the data. I'm not using Redux Toolkit here. It was a long time ago. I mean, a couple of months ago, maybe even more, that I wrote this. Also, we want to do a history replace upon mounting the component, because history replace will help us put the data and like be in the construct of our solution design to put it in the state. And then once the replace happens, when we go back, we want to show this data. So we will pick it up with our use location, because it will be stored there, and we'll show it here. To do component will have a possibility to execute back and send data. So we need to store this data into Redux in the first place. It's a random number, and it needs afterwards to do history back. This is like extra back action. So let's go back to this simple application. We are doing go to do. Afterwards, we want to, just a second, let's say go to add a random number. Go to shopping list. Random number 2.0, okay. Let's add another one. For to do, it's 1.3. Great. Now, let's go back and send data. So we had 1.3. If we go back, we want to override this data with 4.6. So what we are expecting is this, not 1.3. It's overridden. And we also want to clean this up. Let's go back. And we have this 2.0, which was left in the first place. And what we want to do is we want to maybe go back and send data. Why is this button here? This button is here because we don't care if the do component is, for example, third in a row, or we simply want to look at this component from independently from the rest of the world. But what will happen if we click back and send data and go back to navigation? Nothing. We ignore it. We are sending the data, but this component doesn't care about the data. However, it needs to care about one thing. If we go back to the code, it needs to care about cleaning up the Redux if there is data. So this is this part of the code that I intentionally skipped. Because otherwise, we will have a Redux data, and if we have some data, when we do a forward navigation, it will trigger this part, if forward navigation is navigation to a shopping list, and will show wrong data. It will be like, that would be a bug. Also, if we don't clean up the data, something similar will happen. So we definitely want to keep this clean. And from this navigation, since we cleaned that thing, let's go to shopping list. We don't have anything, so everything is like clean and neat. That's pretty much it, guys. I think I have time for Q&A. So.
Great. So let's give a round of applause. Very informative talk. Are there any questions?
If there are no questions here live, I will be on my booth for the next couple of hours. So please come forward and ask me anything about this one, about this. If it's anything related to the songs that you've written, please ask me that also.
Okay, great. Thanks for being at the Astro stage today. That's it.